Maybe my problem is I'm always curious if other people are living a better dream than me.
Oh, that's probably a therapy point you have to figure out. Yeah.
That's why you're here today.
Dude, if we can be each other's therapists, I'm down for it.
I've got Patrick Campbell here. Patrick, welcome.
What's up, man?
You just sold your company, ProfitWell.
I did a thing.
To Paddle.
To Paddle. And I have now, I don't know if the video, but I don't know if we're using the video, but I have paddle gear behind me, all kinds of stuff. I'm wearing paddle shoes.
That was quick.
I got paddle
wow
black and yellow sneakers now. I'm like,
was that part of the deal that you wanted some sneakers with it too?
Yeah, these $80 sneakers were like, that was the deal point that we were going back and forth on. No, I'm an all-in guy, man. Like once I'm in, I'm all in. So yeah, it's one of those things that I'm excited about. But yeah, sold the company, joined Paddle. I'm actually in their London office right now. I've been here for about a month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, this is the new studio. This is why I couldn't figure out focus and stuff like that before we started recording. But yeah, it's been a good time so far.
So you're already getting stuff done there. You're like, we gotta get the content machine running.
If only you knew. Yeah, there's a lot. There's because there's like integrating, which is like,
yes,
we brought everyone on board. So thankfully, I mean, we were bootstrapped, so there wasn't a lot of like extra, if that makes sense. So it wasn't like we had a huge finance team, they had a huge finance team, that type of thing. But then there's like a lot of storming and norming in probably good and bad ways. Like good ways in the sense of like, oh, we're good at this. Like, let's bring that over here. Oh, like they're really good at that. Let's have them take over this. And yeah, and so it's been kind of an interesting month, like, that we've been cranking, and lots of fun, like trust building. Like, I don't think a lot of people with integrations realize, like, you kind of just assume you have this trust because you have it with your team that you've built over so long. And it's like, no, you're like in an arranged marriage now. You kind of have to rebuild it all, which is not so fun.
So let's go back a bit for people who aren't aware. Sure. You founded ProfitWell in 2012?
Yep. So started 2012.
It wasn't always in like SaaS metrics, right? You started doing something else first.
Yep. So we were then called Price Intelligently. We still have that brand and product. It's part of the ProfitWell suite, but we wanted to help folks with one of the biggest problems a lot of B2B folks have, which is their pricing. We had this little software app. A lot of people don't realize it started off as pure software, and then basically people asked us to do services on top of the software, and we were like, no, VCs don't like that. And then they basically said, we'll pay you a lot of money. And we were like, okay. So that's kind of what started this tech-enabled service, as it's called. And then a year or so into that, we knew we wanted to get to like a more ubiquitous type of software. And we were helping a company that was about to IPO with their pricing, and they were calculating MRR and churn incorrectly. And so we wanted more data. That was kind of a good moment of like clarity. And, that's kind of when we started building our subscription financial metrics product. And we've now evolved into a number of different products that help you basically plug it in, and it helps reduce your churn, as well as some other stuff that we've been working around pricing and stuff like that.
And when you started the company, because it wasn't just you who founded it, right? There's quite a few of you, I think.
No, it's actually kind of complicated. So it was I had part-time co-founders, which is not, I would not suggest, although I think you guys kind of did that. So I will, it doesn't, it's not a, it is not a built-in key for success. I think you guys knew each other beforehand. I didn't really know these guys, and everything's great.
Yeah, I see 3 names besides you on the Crunchbase profile.
Yeah,
so it says there was 4 of you total.
No, so here's kind of like the clearer way. So it was myself and these 2 other guys. They were on our board the entire time, all the way up to the sale. They were advisors, but they never really came into the business and like worked full time on the business. And there was some misaligned expectations. I don't think anyone's nefarious. I think like, I was a first time founder, so pretty naive and all that kind of stuff. And they were like, they had never founded anything before, like seriously founded anything before. So I think that like, it was one of these things where all kind of mixed together, and everything worked out. We're brothers, all that kind of stuff. But it was just me in a room for like 18 hours a day for the first like 9 months. And then that's when Peter was brought on, who might be listed in the Crunchbase article or wherever you're looking. And then Facundo was brought on a little while after that. And so I think that like it's complicated, but like if I'm referring to my co-founders, I typically am referring to Peter and Facundo, even though they weren't there like day one. And then the other guys are more advisors and board members, if that makes sense.
And so you start ProfitWell. And eventually, and officially, you've got Peter and Facundo as your co-founders.
Yeah.
What does bootstrapped mean in this context? Did you each put in a bunch of money? Were you very lean? Like what did that actually look like at the beginning?
Yeah. So so those guys, you know, thankfully have always been paid. They didn't put in anything except probably not getting what they truly could get on the open market, if that makes sense. For me, it was, I cashed in, I had a small 401k. I think it was like 14 grand, like, cause I was in my mid 20s or early 20s still. Cashed it out, giant tax. Like there's a 40% tax on those dollars, something crazy. I can't even remember. And then basically lived on that for like 6 months and told myself if I couldn't like get revenue or some sort of revenue within like 6 to 9 months, or like very clearly see a path towards it, I could always find a job. And that was like a really big realization for me, especially coming from I come from a very blue collar family. Like the fact that I had left the government, let alone left Google, my parents thought I was insane. And then like when I jumped out, they were like, what is going on? And and I internalized that, and I was actually like, worst case scenario, I can go be a construction worker. I can go work at a Starbucks, something like that. Yeah, but that was kind of our
even though you could have probably gone back to the government or
of course,
Google or somebody else. Yeah.
But I had to put my mindset in like I can always find a job. It might not be a job I want, but I could feed myself, which, you know, was
yeah. That's funny. That's like I've had a version of this, which was a lot of founders will say, now I'm unemployable. I could never go back to having a job.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, if I needed to feed my family, I would go work at a Starbucks. I would do a double shift. Like that. Of course, if you had to, you would go back to employment. But there's a psychological trick there, which is, you know, if you can imagine yourself going back to Starbucks and going, well, that's the worst case scenario is me working at a Starbucks or whatever. Wouldn't be awesome.
Yeah.
But you know, it's still like, there's still be ways for you to make money. And the truth is that, you know, most founders are actually more employable than they think they are, really.
Yeah. It's a happiness thing, I think, too. Like, I think
I think that's what people mean, is that
of course.
It's a happiness thing. Although I think they also think they could just never have a boss.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think you could.
Well, that's the thing I worried about.
The right boss, you definitely could.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing I worried about, because I have a boss now, right? And it was something. What was really interesting about it is that I think if you're running your company properly and you're not like you're trying to like grow, like you're trying to be a big company and you're running it properly, that's the caveat, because not everyone's trying to like grow really quickly or anything like that. I think that you have to run your team as if the team is the boss, meaning like your exec team or your co-founders, your partners, whatever it is. It's like that team of rivals concept. Like Bob Iger, the Disney CEO for a long time, I think he talks a lot about this. Like everyone at the company or everyone at the exec team, like what makes it great is theoretically each one of them could be CEO or could be a CEO, right? And that's kind of how I really felt about Peter and Facundo. And then when coming to Paddle, that was like a really big thing. There's a lot of founders on the exec team, like a lot of founders. And so part of that's great, but part of that's probably not great depending on how you look at it. But that's how the whole boss thing kind of like allowed me to kind of like be comfortable with that, because it's very exec team, which is better than like a very top-down structure, if that makes sense. Yeah.
This actually brings up a question I've always had about you and your company.
Yeah.
Which is, I think you somewhere I heard you talking about this decision you made whether you wanted to be a lifestyle company or a big ass company.
Yeah.
And you talked with the team and you wanted alignment around this idea that we want to go big.
Yeah.
Why did you want to go big? What was it about going big that was motivating for you personally?
Yeah. That's a great question.
And what did going big mean? Does going big mean capturing all the market? Does going big meaning having a big exit? What was the discussion around that with you and the team?
I think so the reason we had that discussion is because it's so crucial in how you make decisions. And I think that we like to think that it's not. The royal we, if you will. Like we like to think that where you want to go as a company, it doesn't matter as much, just make decisions along the way. But like the way you make decisions around sales, the way you make decisions around team structure, who you hire, all of these other things, like is very much predicated on like the type of company you want. Like if you want, and I don't know what the other word for lifestyle, like lifestyle businesses, I don't think it should be a pejorative, but some people are, use it as a pejorative. I think it's like, if you want a great business that like, gets to an amazing lifestyle and that's kind of what you want, you're going to hire more contractors. You're going to hire less people, right? If you want to create like a large company, like you're going to hire people, like you have to, right? And you need leaders, right? And those are expensive, right? Like and that takes money out of the business. And, for us, it was also around like, I think the average amount I made over the past 10 years, like the average was $71,000 a year. In more recent years, I was making my salary before the acquisition was $150 annually. And so it was one of those things where like,
which is,
go ahead, sorry.
Which is quite low
Still
for
low.
like,
yeah.
I mean, I think I was surprised when I saw that. I saw you tweeting about your salary and I was like, wow, like, because you've built this big company, this big brand that is quite recognized. And in some ways, that salary kind of structure was more similar to my friends who have been at funded startups. Yeah. Like the funded startups and the investors are like, hey, you got to grow. Like keep investing this back in. Don't take too big of a salary, But that's exactly. And a lot of successful bootstrap people I know who are, let's say, over the $1 million ARR mark, they pay themselves really quite well. Yeah. Like 200s, 300s, 400s, even up to $1 million. So,
but that's the thing.
I was surprised by that.
But that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Because if we wanted to be a lifestyle business, and again, not pejorative, like that's what we were going to do. We were going to be like, great, let's do profit first. Let's do distributions. Let's do these types of things. Like, but if we're trying to create a big ass company, it's like, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to like, instead of like paying myself, that extra 50 grand or something like that, we're going to hire a BDR. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. And there's a point where it's detrimental. Yeah. Like I think that we probably should have increased the salary sooner because I do think it actually caused detrimental decisions. But I think it's one of those things where that's the reason we had to have that conversation. Because it affects so many decisions. And I think again, like where we stayed when we went to conferences, like the team, one of the biggest jokes was like going out of this transaction was Patrick is never going to book our travel again. Thank God. Because I would book travel and like, I wouldn't book the Super 8, but I wasn't booking like the Four Seasons or anything by any means. And it's not like Paddle's doing that either, but it was like, I would book like if there was a Spirit Airlines and it was not a long flight, you were going on Spirit Airlines, right? But also me, like I was going on Spirit Airlines too, right? And so I think that was a big thing. Now why a big ass company? Like you're asking, what's funny? Like Baremetrics Josh tweeted, the other day about how like Josh and I are very similar in so many different ways. And like, we like to make things like when he tweeted about his Glowforge, I was like, I have a Glowforge. Like there's a lot of these little things, like he likes the West Wing. I like the West Wing. Like there's a lot of these things. We're also just like, white guys of the same age basically. So I think that drives a lot of it as well. But one of the things that he tweeted that I'm just like so the opposite of, not in a judgmental way. It was just like, he has a lot of side projects. He has a lot of like things. He likes to start things. I think he learned that, he needs to treat his main thing like a main thing, based on his tweets. But for me, I can't do that. Like I'm all in.
Yeah.
Like I'm all in, and I don't think it's healthy always, but I'm like all in to the point where like I can't have like a side hustle. I can't have some of these things. I need to like go at one thing. And maybe I learned to kind of like relax a little bit, but I'm very much like a singular focus. And so I didn't necessarily want a lifestyle business, because I think a lifestyle business, it's not that there's people listening to this where it's like, it is all in and it's a lifestyle business still. And that's fine. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is like, if we got to a certain point, 8 figures in revenue, and I'm treating it like a lifestyle business, like I think that'd be really hard for me. And thankfully the guys are similar thinking. And so it was more of an all in. And I also like believe, and this is not a judgmental statement, this is a very personal statement. I like, there's, someone described it as like there's almost this like David Goggins nature of SaaS, like how I approach things in the sense of the struggle. Like I'm very much like, if it's not a hard thing, then why are we doing it? Right? Like if it's not hard, like that's the purpose. Like that's why we're on this earth, is to like do hard things and grow. Right. Which is, you know, the David Goggins thing is almost like, I think he's a masochist with some of these things. I'm not quite on that level, but it's more of like, I think that there's this view I have of like trying to do something hard because it's worthy of doing it. And that's kind of where my values sit, if that makes sense. So it's a very personal decision, I guess, the way I'm trying to say it.
Yeah. And I mean, some folks, I mean, it's just unavoidable. The fact that Baremetrics sold for 4 million and you've sold for 200 million. Now that must be a mixture of stock and cash, right? That's not all cash, is it?
It's a mix. Yeah.
It was a mix. Yeah. Because I don't think Paddle's even raised. Paddle's raised maybe just under 300 million or something.
Yep.
So there's no way they would have paid out 200 million in cash. That's most of their
stores.
They're in their bank account. Yeah. Okay, so you got a mix of stock and cash, but still the exit is there's people have been saying like, wow, this is a 50 times exit, and some people have Josh himself is like, well, here's why I think that happened, and he said, well, maybe it's because I treated Baremetrics too much like a side project. And there was some other things too. He got locked into Stripe.
Yep.
And he was not freemium. You were freemium.
Yep.
Do you think that part of your, and in some ways I'm asking this selfishly too, because another comment has been around the acquisition of ProfitWell has been, it's better to try to go out and own the market, right? To try to become the dominant player. And, you guys were clear that you wanted to be a big ass company. Was that part of being a big ass company? Was that you really wanted to own as much of the market as you could?
Yeah.
Was that strategic? And then is the strategy there, like once you own the market, then you just have so much more leverage? Or like, what was some of your thinking around that? Or was it simply the challenge? Like, let's just see how much of this nascent category can we develop and then, become dominant in?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. I think that, so for one, I do think Josh is right in his analysis on a couple of things. Like, you have someone treating it like a side project, and then you have me who's insane. Like, like in terms of like focus, like assuming the same intelligence, like one will win, right? And without luck and stuff like that, right? So I think that's really tough. Yeah. And I think that's helped him, and I'm an investor in his next thing maybe. And so I think that I think that's a really good lesson for him. And I think it's a hard one, because think of the introspection that he has to have to like look at that, which is so hard, right? And I think that the other thing is like the lockup with Stripe. I think it points to an interesting situation, because some of these markets are not big enough. Like they seem big. Oh, subscription companies everywhere. It's like there are 150,000 max subscription companies in the world. That includes subscription media.
Yeah.
It includes subscription memberships, subscription SaaS, subscription consumer, enterprise subscription. There's 150,000 max. Like, we're not talking about e-commerce startups where there's like millions of stores and millions are coming on board like every couple of years, right? And so what we did is we looked at that. We looked at all the competition and we basically said, okay, like analytics products inherently kind of suck to build because no one appreciates the work that went into them and they're not willing to pay anything for them. Like, we did our pricing research on metrics because we were going to charge for it. Like, it was originally going to be a paid product. And in all this context, we said we have to go up market, which that means hiring a lot of people and being a funded company. We have to do free, which probably should have meant we raised money. Like, we probably should, because we thought, oh, how hard could accuracy be? You know, which was famous last words, right? So I think like, that's what guided the decision to go free. And then the thesis became, we really like this concept of do it for you. So Retain, the beauty of Retain is that we do it for you. You plug it in and it's done. You don't have to write emails. You don't have to, and it's not because like, we don't want, it is kind of because we don't want your input. Like, it's because we're studying everything. And because we have all this data, we can understand exactly what's good or bad. And then we do it for you. And you don't want to become an expert in credit cards. You want to just understand like, great, it's fixed, right? I made more money this month than I should have than I was going to because ProfitWell fixed it with Retain. And that's where the data mode, like, it wasn't a network effect of users and customers. That's what a lot of people think, like, oh, they get upgrade pass. Like, we certainly get that. And the brand really helped. But it was a network effect with the data when we were able to study that data and input that into products so we could build products that do it for you, like lowered your churn automatically. And so I think the mindset, it was just a mindset and a focus where it's hard to sell a product that's underappreciated just in general, like metrics in general. It's hard to sell that in a market where there is a viable free alternative where even if you didn't really like the design as much because people love Josh's design, or maybe ChartMogul had a couple extra features than we did, like, it's really hard to compete with it unless, you know, your product like is 10x better, and there wasn't going to be a 10x better product in the market because we were going to keep moving. And I just don't think there can be a 10x better product in analytics in general.
Yeah. And then there was also the risk, which ended up coming true, which is, you know, Stripe added analytics, even PayPal added analytics. And Recurly and other, it wasn't like this category was completely new. Like Recurly and other products had some of these analytics before. Your comment about the market being small is so interesting because this gets back to something. I mean, people are tired of me talking about this, but the characteristics of a market, the size, the shape, and the dynamics
guides everything.
And so maybe we could get into this a little bit. So you said 150,000.
Yep.
And so, you know, let's say, you know, $99 a month, if that's where you start. I think that's where ChartMogul starts. And then, you know, if you captured 20,000 of that 150,000, that's a fair chunk.
Yeah.
You know, that's $2 million a month or whatever. Not a bad business, but I mean, and we don't know what ChartMogul's metrics are. Do you have any idea of size? And like, if you guys were out to own the market, was ProfitWell number one by a large margin, or did ChartMogul have a significant portion as well?
We have 30,000 subscription companies on ProfitWell. It's now more than 30,000. Okay. And then ChartMogul has 1,000 to 2,000. Baremetrics had about 1,000. Okay. It might be a little bit more, but yeah. So I think,
wow.
I think the other thing to point out here that you kind of brought up is the physics of a market guides so many things. Like,
yes.
And a lot of people don't realize, like, even if, let's say we just wanted to be a lifestyle business, we wanted a great business that like guided, you know, all of our lives, made us all very wealthy. Everyone was like, you know, had really great profit from the entire company. We were a great company to work for, et cetera. 20,000 customers paying $100 a month. Oh my God, what a grind, right? And I can tell you right now, for most of the market, $100 a month is too expensive. Like, it's insane, right? And so we basically, like, honestly, the worst thing, like the thing we got wrong was the market. Like that's the thing we got wrong. Like it worked out, so I'm not complaining, but like we knew, like as we started getting into like we're trying to be a big company, like we knew our TAM was not big enough. Like our TAM, the way we monetize, and even though we were monetizing our leads better than anyone else in the space, because with Retain, someone who wasn't willing to pay $50 a month for metrics is willing to pay $300 a month because it's purely pay for performance, right? But the advice to anyone else listening is like, don't underestimate the velocity of your market, because even if you're building something that like is in a super competitive space, especially if you're building something in a competitive space, like if the market's big enough, that's fine. Like you can make a great, like again, lifestyle business. But if you're in a market that is squeezed and it has competition, like go into another market. Unless you're really just glutton for punishment.
It feels like this is the area that gets misunderstood a lot. So you said TAM, total addressable market. Can we get into this a bit more? Because
there's 150,000 subscription companies. Maybe that's our total addressable market, but like our realistic addressable market, I can tell you out of those 150,000, 75,000 are just not addressable for us because enterprise companies, they're too big. They're, you know, they don't fit our billing systems we support. I think in a bootstrap company or a lifestyle business, you don't necessarily have to worry about, oh my God, I have to pitch something that has a huge addressable market. But if you have a very large addressable market, it's probably an indication of the ease of your go-to-market strategy, because everyone already has one of these things and I'm just going to sell a different one, you know, that type of a thing, versus I'm trying to invent a market.
Yes. And you also talk about the velocity. So what do you mean by velocity when you use that as a descriptor, or the physics of a market?
Yeah. Totally.
What are you talking about there?
So things around like it's the number of logos in the market, like number of potential buyers. And again, it's not like if we're selling into subscription company, it's not every subscription company, or if it's like we're selling a consumer product, it's not every consumer. It's people who fit some sort of a segment. That's our addressable market theoretically. And the bigger that segment is, just the number of humans that theoretically will go to your landing page is just increased. And the number of humans you're able to like market to, right? So the reason our strategy for marketing is what it is not because Patrick has a big ego and really likes to do podcasts. The reason it is because we need a brand. We need people to know who we are. And you don't get that through paid media. You get that through content. You get that through community. You get that through events. You get that through those types of things, so that when you're talking to someone, Justin, about, hey, I need metrics for my subscription business, you go, well, you know, there's a couple, but I know ProfitWell's free, right? Yeah. And so, you know, and Patrick is on the podcast and like, you should check it out, but also check out Baremetrics and whatever. And then that's all I need. I just need you to refer to it, because when they get into the product, they're going to compare and contrast it. And the product is good enough, if not better in certain ways, that they're going to stay, right? And so that's what I mean is like, if you are selling to like a fitness product, your TAM is huge because there's so many people who are trying to get healthy, and you can drive that through paid and through, you know, display ads and all these other things. You don't really need a brand. You don't really need content unless you're doing an SEO play in that case. And so that's what I mean by the physics, is like, how many people can you get through in a very quick manner into your funnel?
And how important do you feel because even in your example, the physics there are that some people are already in motion.
Yep.
And so I have this feeling like most of the success of a market, of a product in a category, has to depend on how many people are already in motion.
Yep. And
it feels like many founders feel like you can motivate people who are not in motion to buy the product. So what's your take on that? Because in your example, there's 2 people in Slack and somebody is looking for SaaS metrics, which means they're already in motion. They already have a company. They already, like, think of all the things they have to do to just get to the starting line of ProfitWell, right?
This is another.
So what's your take on that?
Yeah. Another huge mistake from us. Again, huge mistake. I'm not trying to be a jerk. It's just like, these are things that I know, like if we had adjusted our thinking, we could have done better.
Yeah.
Right now in like the average subscription or SaaS company, depending on how you want to slice it, the median expenses that go to sales and marketing is 60%. 60%. So if I take 1,200 companies, I think the study was, I add up every dollar they're spending on everything, toilet paper, ads, everything in between, right? And 60% of those dollars are going to sales and marketing. Now you throw in operations, you throw in like the desks and everything like that. How much money do you think is left over for retention and pricing, which are two paid products? There's not a lot.
Yes.
And so we're literally like, we spent 10 years yelling about pricing and yelling about retention, and people get it. Like people find it important, but like we're constantly educating and we're fighting this inertia of, yes, there's 15,000 different sales and marketing pieces of software, right? So there's a hugely different problem there, but that's another thing, right? Like we're not selling something, like it's rare that someone like is looking for like dunning or credit card failure software, right? And we try to own those places, obviously, but it's a lot of education. And I think that you're better off finding people in motion with something. So if I was just trying to like create, oh, I'm going to work on something for 6 months and I want to get it to 100 grand a year in like revenue, right? I would focus on things where people are already in motion, huge TAM, meaning lots of people. And we don't always build these things for money. I actually love like the SaaS and subscription community, like a lot. Like so it's one of those things where like, it's not all about the money. It's not all about the TAM, but it's like, if I wanted to make it easy, those are the things that I would look for. And then the third piece is lock-in. I would try to build a product that had lock-in. Like what's amazing about billing systems, there's so much lock-in. Like people like, they install it and they're like, there's only a couple points in their history that they want to change it or are thinking of changing it. And that's a whole new problem for Paddle now or I'm discovering at Paddle, but it's also the brilliance of like the Stripe Atlas program. Like the brilliance of the Stripe. I always thought, oh, that's just them being nice and like, you know, giving back to the community. And part of it is, but another part of that program is once you got that Stripe account, like why would you like do anything else? Right. And then normally we see people who reach like 700,000 a year to about $1 million a year. That's the next, like, then they're looking at ChargeBee, Recurly, Paddle, et cetera. But it's lock-in. If you can get lock-in is the third thing I would look for, but it's not as crucial as the first two, I'd argue.
Yeah, the physics. I love that idea, that metaphor of the physics, because I'm trying to describe so many of the metaphors we use in startups, but especially in bootstrap startups, are incredibly two-dimensional. And so there's this idea of like this binary of charge more. And I've always been saying, no, there's way more nuance in pricing strategy. Like when I actually read academic papers on pricing, there's a ton of math that I do not understand with tons of variables. And even if you wanted to, if you're a dumbass like me and you wanted to look at the price, like, should I charge more or should I not? There's a lot of places I'd have to look. Like, how is pricing anchored by the existing competition? Because if MailChimp is charging $49 per month for whatever, 1,000 subscribers, ConvertKit can't come in and charge 2,000 unless there's something significantly different. And you know, Nathan's always anchored his pricing, I think, within 10% of MailChimp for that reason. It's like, you can't be too much higher, right? And oh, sorry, do you want to talk about that quick? Pricing's your thing. I just mentioned it in past.
Yeah. No, I think it's like you put a bone in front of a dog and it's I think it's, you know, what's funny is like, I think your statement of like the binary nature of a lot of advice is like something that we all need to learn sooner than later in our trajectories, right? Like you and I are baked, like we're like, you know, thankfully we learned it, but I think like teaching that to some of, you know, if you're early in your trajectory, like learning that is so important. It gets me, it grinds my gears about some of the Twitter bullshit that you see, like the advice and stuff, because it's like, it's the equivalent of like drink 8 glasses of water a day, stay hydrated, guys. Like, and it's like, yeah, but it's really nuanced. Like, I'm a large human. I need more water, you know, like you eat a lot of salt. I don't know if that's true or not. You need more. Like, and I think it's like a lot of this advice is like pithy baloney, but all advice is more nuanced. It depends. Like, I think freemium is the future, but should every company use freemium? Of course not. Right? Like, of course not. Like, maybe in some way over the next decade, but that's a big thing for everyone to latch onto is like, you have to take in the advice and then filter it through a framework for your business. And I think not enough of us do that.
And understanding that, again, the idea of the physics of a market, I just love that idea because the podcast market, podcast hosting market, has similar physics to web hosting, but different in some notable ways. But we are most like web hosting. So when Ruben Gamez was giving me advice early on, he said, if I was you, I would look at web hosting because they're 2 decades ahead of podcast hosting. And likely what worked there, the dynamics that work there, are also going to apply. And so, for example, affiliates. That's
really good advice.
Is big, and it was big. Now, the dynamics of the podcast host, and he was also clear to say, and we knew this from the beginning, like the paid podcast hosting market is maybe 100,000, 200,000, something like that. And with a much lower average revenue per user than, you know, we're high at our entry level, and our entry level is 19. Libsyn's entry level is 5. And so we knew that the physics of our market are defined by those boundaries. And no matter how much I wish, like I could wish and wish and wish that this will be a $1 billion company, there's just no way it's happening. The dynamics in this market it's impossible. It's impossible the way it is right now for this to be a $1 billion company. Now, the physics change all the time. Like we found with, Anchor, there was a worry with Anchor. Anchor's ended up being an incredible lead gen for Transistor in the same way that Substack's free email newsletter has been unbelievable for Nathan and ConvertKit. All of a sudden, the physics change. Now, instead of 500,000 podcasts in the world, some of which are free on free hosting or whatever, now there's, in a matter of years, there's 2.5 million or 4 million or something like that.
You should never.
And what does that mean? The physics change. But at the same time, even with 2.5 million podcasts in the ecosystem, but if you ask me to place a bet on whether any of us were going to be a $1 billion company, even in 10 years, I would say no. I wouldn't make that bet. Now, would I make a bet that Paddle could be a $10 billion company in 10 years? I might make that bet because the dynamics of that market are so much different.
The physics are different.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you should, in terms of physics, like never underestimate the entrant of a competitor on what it, like competitors entering your market historically make the market better. Like you're always scared. And one of the things we would always say is like, again, nothing against our competitors, but like we haven't thought of them that much in the past couple of years because like 30,000, then 20,000 or 25,000 versus 1 to 2. And they're monetizing differently. Our monetizable products are growing pretty rapidly, but like, it was one of those things where we were like, we need a really big competitor. We need a big one, like a serious big one, because that trains the market in a way that you can't. Like I can't train the market fast enough as like Stripe's metrics actually being like Stripe's metrics are not like, I'll say it. Like I love the Stripe company. They're not great. Like they're inaccurate. Like they make some very obvious accuracy issues, but it is the bare minimum. They needed the bare minimum. And like, it's just one of those things that wasn't like amazing. And so, it was one of those things that like, it would be cool if like HubSpot got into the space, right? Now I say that and then they get in the space and they have all the money and we're like, oh my God, right? But like that's one of the things that like when you have competitors enter the market, it changes. The market changes. The throughput is like now higher because all of a sudden that SEO you've built, people are starting to search for it more, or your ads are getting more traffic, or like those types of things. Now I will say though that like in the podcast hosting space, like one question that's useful, if you want to build a big company, or even if you're just a bootstrap company, you're thinking like, hey, I want to like just be bigger. What would it take my market to have $1 billion exit? Whether it's me or someone else, right? That's a big thing. And that's what guided us a little bit in the free conversations, because we knew it wasn't going to come from metrics. And we knew like, well, what would it take? Well, we'd have to solve these 6 problems and blah, blah, blah. And that started where guiding where product basically went. But it's a good thought exercise.
How much do you think, I mean, again, the dynamics of every market are different and could change literally 1 week to the next.
Yeah.
Overnight. But how, when, and you know, founders, I think we think in bets, you know? But I don't know if I'm always, the question for me is like, for example, should Transistor try to go out and own the market? Like right now, we have maybe 1.5% of the paid podcast hosting market. That's my guess.
Sure.
But, you know, we have a 4-person company. Yeah. Everybody's paid very well.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's certainly threats.
Sure.
But and, you know, I often, this was a debate I was having with Dave Zorob at Chartable, and his answer changed depending on how things were going, because we started our companies at about the same time. He went venture capital, he raised money, and we didn't. And so the first 6 months, he was doing better because he had money in the bank and he wasn't suffering as much as John and I were.
Yep.
But then, you know, 12 months in, John and I are both full-time. We'd both quit our previous things. And we're already making probably maybe even a better salary than Dave is at that point.
Yep.
And then since then, it's, you know, maybe Dave was looking at us going, man, I wish I'd done the bootstrap thing.
Yep.
But then he just sold to Spotify and maybe it changes again, you know, the calculus. So how do you think through that stuff when, and then also, and Dave was raising money because he wanted to own the podcast analytics space.
Yep.
Not a huge market, but
sure.
He wanted to own that space, and arguably he accomplished it. Arguably his timing was better than the 6 podcast analytics companies that had come before him. And so it paid off. How do you think about that calculus of, and clearly ChartMogul's gone a different route. They don't want to own the market in terms of market share. Yep. They're doing a different way. So how should people be thinking about that calculus? Is it a strategic thing? Is it a personal thing? Should bootstrap companies try to own their market?
Yeah. Ultimately I think it comes back to being, so I think there's 2 really important questions you have to ask yourself. One, the personal thing. What do you want? Right? Like Dave, I don't know Dave, but like I could see a world where if I was in his shoes and I raised money and I went balls to the wall and I failed, let's say someone else came along, Spotify came out with their own stuff, you know, they have to shut the company down. There's a world where he learned those lessons in half the time you or I would learn those lessons with a bootstrap company, right? Because money is speed, right? And so I think it's like, what do you want? Like, do you want the quickest path to learning, right? If you want the quickest path to learning, maybe fundraising is the right way to do it, right? And it's never, like we were talking about before, it's never a binary thing. There's not like one thing you want, right? But there's a set of values that you want. And those are the values that you, like even us, like we didn't want to grow at all costs, right? Like we didn't want to be a large company at all costs. We wanted to like protect certain aspects of our culture. We wanted to protect certain aspects of like the value people were getting, et cetera. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like the personal. And then another question is like, is it the right time for funding? So there might be, funding might be off the table for a bunch of things, for a bunch of the personal reasons. But then it's like, no, I want to build a big company. And then is it the right time? ProfitWell did not raise money at all, but we should have raised money probably 4 or 5 years ago, like 100%. And the reason is because one point we should have raised money is, and this is pure hindsight, we wouldn't have known at the time, so we wouldn't have done it. We should have raised money when we realized we were doing a free product in a financial space that required accuracy. Should have raised money. Would have shaved probably a year off of our trajectory. And then the other time we should have raised money is like when we started getting really good repeatable growth out of our sales team. Just should have raised money. Because that's, you know, the speed, you know, dump the money in, speed goes out. And our metric, we were like really proud of like our LTV to CAC ratio. And it was like, no, like that's super cute, but it also means that like we're not growing fast enough because we're not investing as much, you know, because we're getting all this like, you know, this low CAC, like we're not investing. So those are the two things I think are really important. And I don't know, ultimately, like you got to be at peace with your decisions. And I think if we do those proactively, it makes the journey that much harder, or that much easier, sorry. Because if Dave theoretically had that thought process before he started Chartable, or like right in the beginning, if it blew up, he did the thing that he was supposed to do. If he sells it, great, he did the thing he was supposed to do.
Yeah. How do you do the calculation? I mean, obviously it's hard, but it sounds like you recognized the threat and the opportunity of the billing side. Like you were, I think I read another interview, or no, you said this in your acquisition blog post, that you had met the people from Paddle and you had said to your engineer, like, hey, if we're going to build billing, we got to do it now because these guys are doing it the way I would do it. So obviously you were thinking about that threat and opportunity. And there's like this threading of the needle of like, if we don't move now, like we either partner up with somebody else, get acquired, whatever, or we may miss our window of opportunity here, or we have to raise money and build it ourselves. How do you think founders should be thinking about that, about the threats and the opportunities and the timing? It's very possible John and I could hold on to Transistor longer than we should.
We should, But I think it's really hard to come to peace with some of these things when, like, before you should, but that's what you should really focus on. So what I mean by that is, like, you and John, like, I don't know what your conversations are like, but maybe it's like, hey, we want to keep growing. Here are some of our non-negotiables, though. We don't want to raise money. That changes the stakes. That changes our outcome, whatever it is. I don't want to work more than X hours a week. We both don't want to work that much, or whatever. I mean, not saying you're not working, but you get what I'm saying. We don't want to work 80 hours a week, right? Whatever those are. And we will grow at the pace that sustains these 4 things. And if that means that this is a 10-year product, or if that means that this is only a 3-year product because someone comes in and eats us up, totally fine. You know what I mean? That's getting peace with that. I think for us, so the conversation that you're reading, I had interviewed Christian, the CEO of Paddle. This was actually 4 or 5 years ago. That's when that took place. And we think about the world, ProfitWell and Paddle, we think about the same way, like in a very, I would say, unique way. And the way that we think about things is, and I think it's true, first kind of 10, 15 years of SaaS in this market was all about creating products that like just kind of like helped me show my boss that I was doing work, or like gave me this like infrastructure to kind of do the work. And what I mean by that is like, you were the expert. You were the expert sitting in your chair, and they just enabled you to use your expertise, right? I think this next wave that we're in is like the software creator is choosing problems where they should know better. Because I think we were tweeting about this. Justin, I don't know how to get podcast subscribers. You know more about podcasts than I do. Just do it for me. Same with hosting, right? Like I don't, like even that part, like I don't know how to like host everything. I don't want to figure this out. Just do it for me, right? And that's what Transistor does. It was just so beautiful. And so long story short, when I met Christian, I'd never heard someone talk that way except us. We were the ones who always talked about the weight. He like literally finished my sentence. He's like, yeah. And it was like a kismet moment. And I literally left and called Facundo and I was like, hey man, this is the first person I've ever met that gets it. We should build this. Like if we're going to build it, we should build it. But to answer your question, I think that it's really hard. Like you have to have that thesis. And then I think you have to have those pre conversations about what is the outcome you want. And then be very open to those outcomes. Like, and it has to be like, I mean, we've all heard the fable about, you know, it's like the guy's in the boat or the guy's stranded and, you know, he's like, you know, God, why wouldn't you help me? And God's like, well, I sent you the boat. I sent you the person. I sent those 4 people to help you and you didn't take it. Right. So you do have to take the opportunities, right? It's not going to just come to you.
Yeah.
But like, if you have those conversations up front, like we had slides in our board deck, here are our potential acquirers. Here's where status is with all those conversations. And we had that slide in that conversation for years before we actually like did anything about it. Like we understood, like, here's where the market was, here's where we could go. Right. We also had a slide about who we could acquire as well. But long story short, like, I think you have to have like, and then in terms of identifying the market, a lot of the market will come to you. Like you'll be big enough, like you'll have made those relationships with the right people. And then all of a sudden, like, hey, I was thinking about this. Like we have this new strategy for the next year. Like you guys would fit into it and want to talk. And then you can make those decisions based on that.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think there's also, I mean, it's tricky because there's so many dynamics. I'm in my 40s. And
which I never
think
believe.
John,
I still don't believe.
John,
you look so young. You look such like a child. No, I'm just kidding.
I think John has the same feeling though of we are kind of an old school company. You know, we're like like Transistor's a fairly simple product with a very small team.
Yeah.
And if the next generation of SaaS, for example, is instead of paying for Canva, where you go in and you create these things, and they've done some for you, they have templates, but the next version of Canva is some sort of AI that just takes all your inputs and generates
what you need.
You know, all of these assets for you and then shows you how to deploy them. You know, the next version of podcasting would be like the hardest part is content, right? And that's where the dynamics of the market really rely on people being incredibly motivated. Like most of our churn happens, you know, when I email people, and I email them manually still. When they cancel, I say, hey, just noticed you canceled. You know, what's going on?
Oh, I didn't want to do it anymore. Yeah.
Most of the times they have 0 or 1 episodes. That's the biggest one. And, you know, if they get 10 episodes, they're much more likely to stick around. If they create an episode and submit it to Spotify, more likely to stick around. If they create an episode and then figure out how to submit to Apple, very likely to stick around. Like it's just these hoops are.
That's great.
But the next version of podcasting could be all AI based. It's like you don't even need to do anything anymore. You just like get it to generate the content for you. It has your voice. It automatically spits it out, and then you just get to upload it. And it's based on, like, let's say it can create a podcast for you automatically based on your tweets and your blog posts from the past month and everyone you interacted with. And it just, and it just does it and it's done for you. Maybe that's the next version.
Yeah. I would say I don't think that's the next version. I think that's, so the one part of the thesis that I didn't talk about is that I think that the product and the team and the customer are still going to be reserved by whoever you're serving, whatever type of business or whatever type of customer. So like in your case, I'm still going to want to create the podcast, right? Now there's a bunch of things around the podcast creation that like Riverside should do more of. There's a lot of things around the distribution that I think you guys should do more of. Like there's a bunch of automatable things around that are probably up there. I do think some people will do like some automated podcasts, like Siri, Frankenstein monster kind of a thing. But like, I think it's more what I would do if I was trying to like look into this thesis for how it could better, you know, help my business, I would do all of the steps between like pre-idea all the way through to like successful podcast. And I would just line those out, and I would categorize them based on probably creative, pre-production, post-production, during, like I'd categorize like 5 or 6 categories, 5 or 6 colors on all those steps. And then I would look at the color that most aligns towards Transistor and be like, these 3 things, they're like right next to what we're already doing. They don't really require that much lift, and they would be a differentiator. These 3 things, I have no idea how we would solve those problems. If we could, that would be genius, but like I have no idea, so we're going to put those in the back burner, right? That's how I would look at this, like, and I think
that's a good point.
That's how you can fix that. Yeah.
Yeah, there are probably adjacent things. And again, the nice thing is you get to fit that to, well, then you get to decide on the trade-offs.
Yeah. Well, here's
what I want. Do we want to hire more people? Do we want to raise money?
What I want from you.
Do we want?
Here's my Transistor idea.
Yeah.
I want you to create an ad campaign right from whatever episode, and you can use the cover art. You just, I don't know, like you just automatically spit it out. It's probably a million times more complicated than I think it is. And then just give me a button. Hey man, just click this button. And I'd be like, okay, like I'm going to set this up because I think that that's like, I'll manually do it on my end, but like there's something there for like podcast distribution. And I don't know, there's something there beyond what you're doing, but that's what I want. That's what I want.
Like you want an automated promotion campaign for a podcast?
Yes. I don't know what, because there was a good thread, I'm sure you saw it, I think it was NPR or something like that, that talked about where most podcast promotion, like for charting and for a bunch of other things, comes from like good ad campaigns, where like they do ad campaigns because Apple, Spotify, etc., they value like the new users or whatever. I couldn't remember all the details of it, but it was one of those things where I read that and I was like, that's great because I can get all the users already on my list, but I want other users, right? So I've run like, I can't remember what's the podcast platform. It's got really simple ads you can grab.
Overcast?
Yeah, I've done Overcast ads and that works pretty well. But I know that there's like, and again, I'm not an expert in Facebook, LinkedIn, all these other stuff, but like, just give me a button. Cool. There we go. The episode's out or the podcast or whatever.
Well, and certainly the most fertile ground for that would be dynamically inserted ads in other podcasts that have a similar audience to you.
Totally.
Because that's where most of the uplift happens. The reason that all the networks are advertising each other's shows, you know, like Malcolm Gladwell, I'm guessing 80% of their like lift for a new show just comes from promoting on other podcasts, and even in their own network, because you're reaching people where they're at, right?
Totally. Well, that might be that idea. I'm realizing now I think about more. This might be beyond the values you and John have set, like in terms of like, we're going to need 7 people just for that one feature. But
no, I think we're actually on that one. I think we're close because now we have a simple dynamic ad insertion tool. And so we can create a layer on top, which says we will help you guys cross-pollinate.
That's great.
And we can do it manually at first, just saying, okay, this is just for shows that have more than 1,000 listeners, and then we'll match you up. But that's eventually, that could happen for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else we should chat about before. One question I have, because we're dealing with this right now, do your employees have equity? How do you guys figure that stuff out?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to do a thread about this tomorrow, or at least this week. We chose, what's funny is the previous startup I was at did not, in my opinion, handle equity in a great way. Like everyone got equity, but they were really cagey about the value of that equity. Like they would be like, you get this many shares, but they wouldn't describe like what that was worth, right? And this was 10 years ago where that was more common. So with ProfitWell, we very much focused on like, okay, like if there's an exit, am I supposed to get 80% of this thing? Like, is that how that works? Right? Like, I think I should get a really large chunk, and probably maybe the biggest chunk, probably the biggest chunk. But like, I don't know, the stories, like the MailChimp story, I mean, MailChimp's, it's obviously a great success, but like it felt, and I don't know how it felt to them. Like, I think they set expectations with their team really well, but like, it probably felt weird that like the team, or very few people in the team, had equity. Like, they got a bonus, but like it was an $11 billion exit. Like, that feels weird, right? Like, I don't know. Like, and it's an emotional and personal thing. So what we did is, interestingly enough, when we were talking about this, Andrew Mason, the Groupon guy and the Descript guy now, he published this article when he was doing Detour, which was like an actually really cool idea. And he ended up talking about how like they did this progressive equity system where it was like basically the founder would definitely get the most, but it was like not egregiously the most. So we didn't do something specific as that, but yeah, everyone had equity. We accelerated everyone's vesting as long as they were with the company for more than a year. We did a bunch of things to like help.
So was this stock options? Like you gave them options, or? No,
what's kind of cool is like they had what are called LLC profit interests, basically, or membership interests.
Okay, you're an LLC. Got it.
Yeah, and so, which was a whole nother complicated thing to figure out. But I think that was kind of the benefit, is like once you had your shares, you technically owned them, which was kind of cool.
Yeah,
like you didn't have to. There was no strike price, anything like that. They were basically founder shares, which is kind of great. And so they didn't have to exercise them. If they left, we had plenty of people get, you know, good amount of money like that don't work here anymore. You know, which, you know, I think is great. Yeah. So we tried to like, now at the end of the day, like I got a lot. So to only say that, bluntly, I have more money than many generations of my family will ever need. And so it's one of those things that, like, it still is weird because even though we did this, it's like, I don't want to say there's guilt because I worked my butt off for it, but there's a little bit of guilt of like, well, I have this much, this person, like, did I really do X more than they did? Like, I don't know. Right. Like, and so, it's an interesting, and I think this is also a very personal thing. Like, don't leave that exit. I wanted to make sure everyone was like, not necessarily happy, because I think, you know, people can be unhappy. Like, we had people cry over $10,000, like tears of joy. Like, and then we had people pissed off they were only getting $100,000. Like money is a really weird thing with people. And so long story short, just make sure you're like, you know, you don't regret how it looks, or not how it looks, but you don't regret how it all shakes out at the end. I think that's an important thing. Yeah.
Well, congrats, man. Like,
thanks, brother.
To have an exit. I think I'm one of the, I've always felt like it's okay to start a company for money. And I also came from, you know, quite meager means. Not a wealthy family. And I also lived many years of my life, like working a paycheck, but working hard and trying to feed kids and pay for a mortgage and everything else. Yeah. And I think it's okay, and it should be celebrated when founders 100%. Have a good exit. So congrats. I think it's great.
Thanks,
I think it's great that you did well, and now that you've got this new adventure with Paddle, it's pretty awesome.
I'm pretty excited.
And I'm sure there'll be a lot more. Well, we'll see a lot more content out of Paddle, I'm guessing. Is that the next part?
Yeah, there's I think I tweeted rather cheekily in it, but I mean it. Like, if you ever wanted to see what we could do with funding, get ready, because it's going to be exciting. Like, people don't realize, like, people don't realize we're the only bootstrap company in our space, but also like to do some of the ideas we did, we were like scraping by and doing like terrible decision making around, like, you know, oh, we have to squeeze this amount of this or that, and now we don't have to worry about all of those decisions anymore, and so it should be a good time.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. The for you to experience the other side of that, because if you were quite frugal before, there's pros and cons to everything. But sometimes certainly the disadvantage of frugalness is that you're not willing to try more experiments that could just waste 10 grand, for example. Are we willing to make this 10 grand bet? No. Yeah. Well, maybe we should make that 10 grand bet, because that 10 grand bet might turn into 100 grand. Yeah. That would be a good bet, There'll
be a lot of good bets.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Sweet, dude. Well, congrats again. Congrats to you and your team. Thanks, the best. All the best luck. And let's chat again in like 6 months and see how things are going over there.